Toxic relationships have a strange way of digging their claws deep into your mind, leaving you trapped in a cycle that feels impossible to break. What's even more shocking is how often this toxicity transforms into an overwhelming sexual obsession, where passion and pain start to blur. Have you ever wondered why someone can't stop craving the very person who hurts them the most? The answer lies deep within female psychology, where emotional highs and lows can create addictive patterns that feel like a drug. The fights, the tension, and the reconciliation all fuel an intoxicating cycle that keeps you hooked. It's not just about attraction, it's about the powerful mix of fear, desire, and adrenaline that rewires the brain. Many don't realize that obsession doesn't come from peace but from chaos. And in toxic relationships, chaos is the main ingredient. By the end, you'll see why toxicity doesn't just destroy, it seduces. Ready to uncover why these relationships become dangerously addictive? Let's dive in. 1. The highs and lows create an addiction. In toxic relationships, the most dangerous weapon isn't the constant drama. It's the roller coaster of emotions that keeps you hooked like a drug. Think about it. When things are good, they're unbelievably good. The passion is fiery, the intimacy feels electric, and every kiss feels like a high that nothing else can compare to. But when things are bad, they're catastrophic. The fights are explosive, the silence is suffocating, and the emotional pain feels unbearable. This constant swing between heaven and hell creates what psychologists call a trauma bond, a cycle of pain and pleasure that wires your brain to crave the very chaos that's destroying you. Here's the trick your mind plays on you. During the low moments, you feel devastated, empty, and desperate for relief. Then, when reconciliation finally happens, your brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin, the same chemicals that make drugs addictive. Suddenly, your partner isn't just the cause of your pain, they're also the cure. And that's the trap. You begin to associate their toxic behavior with passion, and the reconciliation sex, or intimacy after a fight, feels like the most intense connection you've ever had. It's not because the love is stronger, it's because the chemistry in your brain is tricking you into believing it is. The sad reality is that the unpredictability makes it worse. If someone treats you badly all the time, you eventually detach. But when they mix cruelty with affection, it keeps you confused and hopeful, like a gambler waiting for the next jackpot. You stay because you're addicted to the cycle, not because the relationship is truly healthy. The highs make you forget the lows, and the lows make you chase the highs even harder. Over time, this emotional roller coaster hardwires obsession into your system, leaving you unable to let go even when you know it's toxic. This is why toxic relationships often turn into sexual obsession. The passion feels more intense, not because it's love, but because your brain is conditioned to link chaos with desire. The fights fuel the fire, and the makeup moments feel almost irresistible. It's a dangerous illusion, but one that explains why people often mistake obsession for love. In reality, it's not love, it's addiction. And until you recognize the pattern, you'll keep chasing highs that only leave you empty once the ride crashes again. 2. Toxic drama feeds the fantasy of passion. One of the biggest reasons toxic relationships morph into sexual obsession is because the drama itself gets mistaken for passion. The constant arguments, the jealousy, the tension, it all creates this illusion that the connection must be deep and meaningful. After all, if you fight this hard and feel this much intensity, it has to be love, right? Wrong. What's really happening is that the chaos is fueling an emotional firestorm that tricks you into believing the relationship is extraordinary. The truth is, real passion doesn't need destruction to survive. But toxic relationships convince you otherwise. Think about it. When emotions run high, whether it's anger, jealousy, or heartbreak, your body goes into overdrive. Adrenaline spikes, your heartbeat races, and suddenly your entire body feels charged with energy. Then, when intimacy happens in the middle of that storm, it feels 10 times more intense. That's why makeup sex is often described as explosive. It's not because the bond is stronger, it's because your nervous system is overstimulated and your brain is confusing chaos with chemistry. This cycle wires you to crave the very drama that exhausts you because you've subconsciously linked it to passion. Here's where it gets even more dangerous. The fantasy of passion blinds you to the reality of dysfunction. Instead of recognizing the red flags, you tell yourself, This must be real love because I've never felt this much intensity with anyone else. You start to equate peace with boredom and chaos with excitement. And so every fight feels like proof that the relationship is alive, while calmness feels suspicious, like something is missing. That's the toxic trap because it conditions you to prefer instability over stability and obsession over genuine love. The irony is that people often stay in these relationships not because they're happy, but because they're addicted to the illusion of passion. They'd rather ride the emotional roller coaster than step off into the calm of a healthier connection. The fire feels thrilling, but what they don't realize is that it's burning them alive. Toxic drama doesn't deepen love, it distorts it. And until you see that the chaos isn't proof of passion but a mask for dysfunction, you'll keep mistaking obsession for intimacy. 3. The illusion of scarcity makes you cling harder. In toxic relationships, scarcity becomes one of the most powerful psychological traps. When love, attention, and intimacy are given in unpredictable doses, they suddenly feel more valuable than they actually are. This is the same principle casinos use to keep gamblers hooked. Random rewards keep you chasing the next win. In relationships, when a toxic partner withdraws affection, ignores you, or leaves you feeling unwanted, your brain panics. You start to crave their attention even more because it feels rare and scarce. And when they finally give it back, it feels like gold. That scarcity effect convinces you that their love is worth fighting for, even when it's slowly destroying you. The illusion works because human psychology is wired to overvalue what is inconsistent. If someone gave you affection and love consistently, it would feel safe. But to someone caught in a toxic cycle, safety often gets misinterpreted as boring. When a partner pulls away, it triggers fear of abandonment, rejection, and loss. These fears create urgency, making every little gesture of attention feel like the ultimate prize. This is why toxic love feels so addictive. It's not steady, it's not reliable, but when you get it, the reward feels euphoric. What makes this even more dangerous is that the scarcity illusion convinces you to hold on tighter, even when you should let go. You start believing that losing this partner would mean losing something irreplaceable. In reality, what you're afraid of losing isn't the person. It's the emotional high that comes with their inconsistent affection. It's not love you're addicted to, it's the dopamine rush that scarcity creates. That's why even when the relationship is filled with pain, betrayal, or manipulation, you still feel obsessed with them. You're not in love with who they are, you're addicted to the cycle they've created. This is why many people in toxic relationships confuse obsession with loyalty. They think their inability to walk away is proof of deep love, but it's really the brain clinging to what feels rare. The less their partner gives, the more valuable it seems. And so the obsession grows, feeding off the illusion that what's scarce must be precious. But the truth is, healthy love isn't scarce, it's abundant. Toxic love only makes it scarce to keep you hooked. Until you break free from this illusion, you'll keep chasing crumbs while calling it a feast. 4. Jealousy and possession intensify desire. Another powerful reason toxic relationships spiral into sexual obsession is the constant presence of jealousy and possessiveness. In a healthy relationship, trust is the foundation, and jealousy rarely takes center stage. But in a toxic one, jealousy becomes the fuel that keeps the fire burning. When your partner flirts with others, withholds attention, or deliberately makes you feel insecure, it doesn't just create pain, it heightens desire. The fear of losing them to someone else makes every moment with them feel urgent, almost desperate. You start to believe you have to win their love again and again, and that chase transforms into obsession. Jealousy works like a magnifying glass on attraction. The moment you think someone else might take your partner away, your desire for them doubles. It's not because they've suddenly become more attractive. It's because your mind is wired to fight harder for what feels threatened. This sense of competition, whether real or imagined, creates a rush of adrenaline that mixes dangerously with lust. That's why sex after jealousy-fueled fights often feels more passionate, more consuming. It's not love making it intense. It's the cocktail of insecurity, adrenaline, and desperation that makes intimacy feel like a battlefield victory. Possessiveness amplifies this effect. Toxic partners often play games with control, sometimes pulling away to make you chase, other times clinging too tightly to make you feel owned. This push and pull dynamic creates a twisted kind of excitement. You find yourself craving their approval, needing their validation, and obsessing over their every move. It's not because the bond is deep, but because the instability triggers survival instincts. Your mind goes into overdrive, convincing you that you need them more than ever, when in truth, you're just caught in a psychological trap. The tragedy is that jealousy and possession don't build real intimacy, they build dependency. They make you crave someone not because they're right for you, but because they've positioned themselves as both the threat and the reward. This constant tension keeps your emotions on high alert, making every kiss, every touch, every moment of intimacy feel amplified. But the intensity isn't proof of true love, it's proof of how powerfully obsession can hijack your mind. And until you realize jealousy isn't passion but poison, you'll keep confusing chaos for connection and mistaking insecurity for desire. 5. Pain and pleasure become intertwined. One of the darkest aspects of toxic relationships is how pain and pleasure become so tightly woven together that you can no longer separate the two. In a healthy relationship, intimacy is built on trust, affection, and safety. But in a toxic one, every moment of passion is shadowed by conflict, manipulation, or emotional turmoil. The result? Your brain begins to associate pain with love and suffering with desire. Over time, you don't just tolerate the hurt, you crave the intense pleasure that follows it. This twisted cycle is what makes toxic relationships feel impossible to escape. Here's how it works. The fights and emotional breakdowns create unbearable lows. You feel empty, rejected, and desperate. Then, when the reconciliation happens, through apologies, sweet words, or explosive intimacy, the relief is so overwhelming that it feels like ecstasy. Your brain links that pleasure directly to the pain that came before it, creating a powerful bond. Instead of seeing the hurt as a red flag, you begin to see it as the price for the passion that follows. The relationship becomes addictive because the suffering makes the pleasure feel stronger than it really is. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same tactic used in abusive cycles and even in animal conditioning. When rewards, like affection and intimacy, are unpredictable, they hit harder. The unpredictability makes every moment of tenderness feel like a rare gift, even though it's only being dangled to keep you hooked. This dynamic makes you confuse obsession with love because you've been conditioned to believe that real intimacy comes at the cost of pain. The danger here is subtle but devastating. You start to normalize emotional suffering as part of love. Instead of asking, "Why am I hurting so much?" you start telling yourself, "This must be how real passion feels." You equate stability with dullness and believe that true connection has to come with chaos. In reality, what you're experiencing isn't deep love, it's psychological conditioning. The pain is fueling the pleasure, and the pleasure is making the pain tolerable. That's not love, it's addiction disguised as intimacy. This is why walking away from a toxic relationship feels like withdrawal from a drug. You're not just leaving a person, you're leaving the chemical cycle your body has come to crave. And unless you recognize that pain and pleasure are being deliberately tangled together, you'll keep mistaking obsession for something sacred. 6. The forbidden element makes it more desirable. There's something undeniably seductive about what feels forbidden. Toxic relationships thrive on this very psychology, the sense that you're indulging in something you shouldn't, and that danger itself makes the connection irresistible. When a relationship is filled with drama, secrecy, or emotional instability, it creates an edge of risk that makes every kiss, every touch, every intimate moment feel more intense. It's like sneaking into a locked room. You know it's dangerous, but the very act of crossing that line makes it exciting. That thrill becomes addictive, not because the love is stronger, but because the relationship carries the weight of something you're not supposed to have. This forbidden element can take many forms. Maybe your partner is emotionally unavailable, constantly pulling away, and every time you get them back, it feels like a victory. Maybe family or friends disapprove, so being together feels like rebellion. Or maybe it's the unpredictable cycle itself, knowing that at any moment, things could explode. Each of these scenarios creates the same result. Your brain interprets the difficulty as value. You start to believe that because the relationship is so hard to hold on to, it must mean it's worth fighting for. In reality, the very obstacles are what's making you addicted. The human mind has a strange way of wanting what feels just out of reach. Psychologists call this the scarcity principle. When something is limited or forbidden, it instantly feels more valuable. In toxic love, this principle runs wild. You don't just want your partner, you want the thrill of chasing them, of breaking the rules, of winning back something that constantly slips away. That chase becomes the obsession, and the sexual chemistry that follows feels supercharged because it's layered with rebellion and risk. But here's the trap: what feels like passion is often just adrenaline in disguise. The danger, the secrecy, the unpredictability, they keep your body in fight or flight mode, pumping you with chemicals that mimic desire. It's not genuine love that makes the intimacy feel overwhelming. It's the high of danger. And the more forbidden it feels, the more you crave it. Confusing obsession for passion. This is why so many people in toxic relationships say things like, I know this isn't good for me, but I just can't stop wanting them. The very act of labeling it bad makes it feel addictive, until you realize that the forbidden element is a psychological trick, not proof of deep connection. You'll keep mistaking danger for desire and obsession for love. 7. The ego trap of proving your worth. One of the most overlooked reasons toxic relationships turn into sexual obsession is the ego trap. When you're stuck with someone who constantly withholds affection, criticizes you, or makes you feel not enough, a part of you becomes obsessed with proving your value to them. It stops being just about love, it becomes a personal mission. You don't just want them anymore, you want to win. You want to finally hear them say, you're worthy, desirable, irreplaceable. And that desperate need for validation doesn't just live in your heart, it seeps into your desire, fueling an unhealthy sexual obsession that feels impossible to escape. Toxic partners often exploit this dynamic. By tearing you down, they plant seeds of insecurity, and then they sprinkle tiny moments of approval that make you chase harder. One day, they'll tell you you're not good enough, and the next day, they'll make you feel like the center of their world. That back and forth convinces your ego that if you just try harder, give more, or love deeper, you'll finally win them over. The problem? Every small piece of validation becomes addictive. The compliments, the intimacy, the rare displays of affection feel like trophies, and your mind craves them like oxygen. This is where sexual obsession takes root. Intimacy in toxic relationships often feels like a moment of redemption, proof that you've finally been accepted, even if only temporarily. The act itself becomes less about love and more about reassurance. You're not just connecting physically, you're trying to silence the nagging voice that says you're not enough. And because that validation is rare, it hits harder, making you equate sex with worthiness. The tragedy is that this cycle never actually satisfies the ego. No matter how much you prove, no matter how much you give, the goalpost keeps moving. Instead of making you feel secure, it keeps you in a state of hunger, always craving, never fulfilled. And because your sense of worth becomes tied to their approval, you end up mistaking obsession for love. It's not about how much you care for them, it's about how badly you need them to validate you. Until you recognize that love shouldn't be a test you're trying to pass, you'll stay trapped in the ego game. And as long as your worth depends on their validation, every kiss, every touch, every night of intimacy will feel less like love and more like a desperate attempt to prove you finally matter. That's not passion, that's captivity disguised as desire. When you step back and look at the cycle of toxic relationships, one truth becomes painfully clear. It was never really about love. It was about the psychological traps, the chemical highs, and the emotional illusions that tricked you into mistaking obsession for intimacy. The highs and lows made you addicted. The drama disguised itself as passion. The scarcity made you cling tighter. The jealousy fueled desire. The pain and pleasure became inseparable. The forbidden element made it thrilling. And the ego trap convinced you to keep proving yourself. Every one of these patterns works like a hook, pulling you deeper into something that feels irresistible but is, in reality, destructive. The scariest part is how real it all feels when you're in it. The dopamine hits after reconciliation, the adrenaline during fights, the false sense of worth during intimacy, all of it convinces your brain that this connection must be special. But the truth is, it's not special. It's engineered chaos. Toxic relationships create chemical storms that mimic the intensity of love, but what you're really experiencing is addiction. You're not craving the person, you're craving the cycle they've trapped you in. That's why leaving feels like withdrawal and why moving on feels impossible. But here's the hard pill to swallow: obsession isn't love, and chaos isn't passion. Real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace, your sanity, or your self worth. It doesn't thrive on insecurity or scarcity. It doesn't make you feel empty when the highs are gone. Real love is steady, safe, and consistent. It builds you instead of breaking you. The problem is, after living in toxicity, peace can feel boring and chaos can feel exciting. That's the illusion you must shatter. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to freedom. The moment you see that what felt like love was actually an addiction to inconsistency, you reclaim your power. You realize you don't need to prove your worth, chase what's scarce, or confuse jealousy with passion. You deserve love that doesn't require suffering as a price tag. You deserve intimacy that isn't tied to pain. And you deserve a connection that feels safe, not forbidden. Toxic relationships often turn into sexual obsession, not because the love is stronger, but because the mind is tricked into believing chaos equals desire. Once you see the truth, you can finally break the cycle. Love shouldn't feel like war. It should feel like home. And until you demand that kind of love, you'll keep mistaking obsession for passion. But once you break free, you'll never confuse the two again.